Hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. And today we're gonna take a look at the much updated graphics card binning chart that I made. You saw this once before when it had like these entries, and now we've added all of these. And yeah, so basically this video has a twofold purpose. The first purpose is that if you have a card that is of all the 4 generations that I've tested, you can use this to compare your card, given that you test your card in a similar way to how I did it. And the second purpose of this video is to like try to deduce some useful knowledge from the data I've gathered here for scaling because of different factors, or like memory chips for specific architectures and all that stuff. And yeah, so basically my method of testing this is for every card I did 2 tests for the core and 1 test for the memory. The two core tests, one is at low voltage, or as it's called here, normal vCore, which is meant to be close to where the card would run stock. And then overvolt vCore is, well, at a higher voltage, close to where, like high enough that you would see scaling if it has voltage scaling, but not so high that like you would like need some advanced mods or certain cards wouldn't be able to do it anymore. So that's why it's only 1.15 volts for Fermi, for example, and then later a bit higher. Kepler is kind of a mess for voltage because there were control issues, but Fermi and GCN have mostly normalized voltage. And then for memory, I recorded which memory chip it is, or IC, and I just did 1 max frequency test. VMem stock, unless marked, for these 2 cards are running at more than 1.6 volts VMem. All of these are GDDR5, so basically all of these run at 1.6 volts. And yeah, I also recorded maximum temperatures in each test, so that because I can't test all of these in one day, and from time to time ambient temperature changes, so even cards with similar heatsinks, or like most of these cards I just tested with the heatsink they come with, unless also marked in the notes. Yeah, so maybe like a card that like this card or like this card is gonna have a big advantage over this card. This card might actually be better, but just because this runs so much colder, it might clock better, which it actually does. This is not the best card I have, even though it has the highest result, because yeah, it ran really cool. And yeah, and then basically nodes is also other noteworthy information, and then also back here we have some more stuff like I have a bunch of cards that were heat gunned back to life, and those are marked because at least 1 card did get its core degraded from getting heat gunned. So there's potentially other cards here that now clock worse than they would have before. Yeah, but before we waste any more time, yeah, let's just get into this. So I'm just gonna go through every card, say a few words about it, and yeah, like anything interesting about the card. So the first would be my GTX 590. I was not able to overvolt this because it comes maxed out. It's a GTX 590. You overvolt this thing, it dies. And yeah, so I couldn't really do anything. The clocks were pretty low. It ran pretty hot. It just in general was a very also that is wrong because it didn't actually apply that voltage. Yeah, the 590 was just an overclocking letdown. I basically have the 590 because I want to have a 590, not because I want to do anything with it, because it is just really bad. Then the GTX 580 Direct CO2. This is a card I really like. However, it doesn't really do that well here because the heatsink it comes with is trash. Don't use the heatsink that this comes with. It is bad, really bad, and because Fermi, not as bad as 1.0, but 2.0 still has a lot of temperature scaling, and if you run this hot, you're losing a lot of frequency. If this wouldn't run that hot, I'm pretty sure the card would have done the same as this. So yeah. Also the memory on this one is pretty good. Also doesn't clock that high because there's no cooling on the memory either. But when the card is on water cooling and the coolant is like chilled down a bit, not like super, not like sub-zero, but like under 15 degrees coolant temp, the memory on this clocks really, really high. So over almost 2700 megahertz. That's really, really good memory. Then my two lightnings, or like one of them is officially lightning, the other one is not. However, they use the same PCB. Both pretty good cores, both pretty good memory. However, one of them is G-die, the other one is probably E-die. I've never verified that, but it's not G-die because I flashed the BIOS from the other card on it and the memory just did weird things, so it can't be G-die, and I'm only aware of E-die. That's an alternative. Yeah. So this one also has pretty strong memory. I never really tested this one cold, but it is very promising. And then the other lightning, this is the one that I did the ambient temperature Firestrike record on for HWBot, and this is also the best core I have. It doesn't have the best memory. It is G-die. G-die has negative temperature scaling around ambient temperatures. Like I don't know if at some point it rolls over if you go like really cold, but for around ambient temp, G-die gets worse the more you cool it down. So that's a bit annoying for this card. However, I fixed that by just not pointing a fan at the memory, and that mostly fixes the issue that the it likes to run hot. And this one, yeah, just has a pretty good core. I think I ran 1120 megahertz on this, like, well, a lot more voltage than this, but pretty good core. Then we have some, basically these cards are not all that interesting. All of them are reference cards. And yeah, I can't really, like, this one became an E-Power because it had a pretty bad core, pretty bad memory. Yeah, like Hynix AFR Type 1 and Type 2 are different things. Type 1 is, it's not going any faster than this. There is no cold scaling and negative voltage scaling on these. So if you have AFR Type 1, you're basically screwed for your memory because you're not going to get any faster than out of the box. And this one also had a pretty bad core. It was actually toasted, didn't mark it. But yeah, this is also the one that I shoved 1.8 volts into just for fun because I wanted this card gone. Then this one, also toasted. It's the green PCB one. That's why I have it, because it's green. I still have that card, but I don't really do anything with it. Core's decent, also has trash memory. I keep it around because it's green. This one I got as working. It has a really good core. It also has Samsung E-die, which Samsung E-die is the best memory you can have. It doesn't clock that great out of the box, but it does have really good voltage scaling and good cold scaling. This card would have clocked very, very well if my E-Power had worked out. So I had this card E-powered. It did work. However, once I went to run benchmarks on it, it always crashed, and I eventually narrowed it down to memory issues. So for some reason, the memory on that card just became very, very unstable. You couldn't run anything on it anymore, and now it's wall decoration, so didn't work out. These two also became E-Powers. Actually had pretty decent cores, both of them. Also both had E-die. However, this one had me feeling like the memory was about to die because it was clocking pretty low and like through several memory-related blue screens. This one also threw a lot of blue screens, but just like random stuff. This one also had a mounting pressure issue, which also this card shares, and also this card shares. Basically, if you don't give it all the mounting pressure you've got, the card won't run. But when it did, yeah, the card went pretty well because I ran the card direct die with a custom air cooler. So yeah, it ran really, really cold. And as I said before, Fermi really likes to be cold. So even though the core on this is not the best one I have, it does have the highest result. This card I do not have anymore. This I sent to a friend. This is the card that I modified in the like fully modding a GTX 580 video. It has AFR Type 2. It also doesn't really have code scaling, but Type 2 has voltage scaling. So Type 1, if you overvolt it, you just get a black screen. The card stops working. If you overvolt Type 2, it scales with voltage, like it clocks better. It runs 1.75 volts like a champ. This one, 1.65 and black screen. So yeah, good card. Send it to a friend. Core is decent on it as well. And yeah, like he has it now, he can do with it whatever he wants. It also has a second 580, so yeah. Then my GTX 580 SO, which apparently turned out to be an engineering sample, which I just noticed a few days ago. Yeah, when this boots up, it has like a splash message of like engineering sample, not for production use or whatever. Might be just the BIOS, but like if you have an engineering sample BIOS on a card, then the card itself is also kind of an engineering sample, whatever. This is AFR Type 1. It does clock pretty well for AFR Type 1, but there's no voltage scaling in this whatsoever, and so no way getting a past 2400. The corner is it's okay, but it's like closer to average than good. Yeah. Then we have my 560 Ti 448. Good core. Memory is GDI, so negative code scaling on this. It has the mounting pressure problem, like I said before, and yeah, it is the first card I ever modded, and it is in a very, very bad state because, well, it is the first card I ever modded. So I don't really run it a lot. Also, the VRM cooling on it is problematic. Then we have my single 560 Ti. Nothing really, there's not a lot I can say about this because the GeoPhone 14 GPU runs a lot faster than a GeoPhone 10. Like, this matches the best clocking GeoPhone 10 at stock. So yeah, I would need more GeoPhone 14s to compare this to say how good the core is. The memory on it could also be a similar thing because this is the only BFR based card, and oh boy, yeah, that's pretty fast. That's like the closest you'll get to like cold and overvolted EDI. And unfortunately I never tested cold or voltage scaling on this memory chip. Also, the card has a controller that is known for tripping over current protection really easily, so yeah, that's why I don't really run the card a lot, and yeah, I don't really have an idea whether it's good or not, sadly, because like, yeah, it's my only GeoPhone 14. Then we have a whole bunch of GTX 480s, one of which died during my tests, so there's no high voltage results. Yeah, this is now the E-Power on one of my 680s that also had the same issue as this card with its memory for some reason. Just my luck, I guess. But the other 480s are working. And yeah, so GTX 400 series, so Fermi 1.0. Basically, this is like Fermi 2.0, but with some of the voltage scaling turned into code scaling. So we have a widely different ASIC qualities here, and basically all of them clock the same. This one's a bit faster because this one has a bunch of mods on it. It has a lot of volt mods, a lot of cap mods, and I'm pretty sure this did 915 before it was modded, so yeah, pretty close to the other cards that are completely stock. And yeah, so basically 400 series, you want to keep them cold, like, yeah, those are pretty cold. Like, as it turns out, blower heatsinks are not all that bad if you just max out the fan speed and just like take the noise it makes. However, ASIC quality does affect how well you do with low voltage. Like, you can see the 90% ASIC just does 900 at stock, while the other ones, well, they're kinda close. This one is pretty far away, but like this one died, so maybe it was like already so close to death. They also all have E-die. This one's modded, so I don't really count this, but like, yeah, they fall in this like 2100 to 2200 range. And yeah, like code scaling and voltage scaling on this. So basically, for 80s, memory modding on them should be pretty straightforward, because I think you can only get E-die, at least in Europe. I've never seen a not E-die GTX 400 series. And the cores, like, if the difference between a 90.8 and an 8.8 ASIC is 2 megahertz, yeah, like, okay. Also the same, both running the same heatsink. Yeah, so basically, I don't think your ASIC quality matters a lot on GTX 400 series, which means you just need a good heatsink, and then you should probably do pretty well. So yeah, so let's get to Kepler. Kepler is a big mess because I wasn't able to control voltage really a lot. So this is what I was shooting for, 1.175 for stock and then 1300 for overvolted. As you can see, this didn't really work out, did it? Especially because these two cards don't change their voltage at all. They have a slider, but doesn't do anything. So this is my 780 Ti Windforce that I dailyed for over 4 years. It eventually died due to thermocycling and me neglecting to really care for it. And I heat gun it back to life, but the core did degrade rather significantly. It did do 1320 before, now it does 1250. So before it was a pretty good card, now it is average to bad. So yeah. The memory on it is pretty decent. Like, for like, okay, the thing with Kepler memory is 780 Ti's ship with faster memory than 780s and 600 series cards. So 600, okay, 650 not, but like 680s and 770s and 780s, I think all ship at 3 gigahertz or 1500 actual, while 780 Ti's ship at 3500 megahertz, or like I think 1750 effective. So this reaching 4 gigahertz and this doing 3.5, even though they're the same memory chip, like the 780 Ti still has an advantage because it is the same memory chip but a different speed bin of it. So this one runs faster. But yeah, for 780 Ti's, yep, best AFR. Like the other one, the other AFR card is just under that. This one has a dead memory module though, so it did run for like an hour, and then a memory module that was faulty before, which I then heat gunned, but like the memory module died again and did not come back from getting heat gunned again. The cornet is pretty good. Like the voltage is higher than the other card because this is a gigahertz edition, not a Windforce. They share the same PCB, but this one is the gigahertz edition is a more aggressively boosting card, so I guess it runs higher voltage, and yep, pretty decent core result, even considering the ASIC quality. So for ASIC quality in Kepler, basically it doesn't really matter. Like high ASIC quality still means your card will probably run pretty well, but low ASIC quality doesn't mean your card is gonna be bad, because this obviously clocks pretty well, before it died, that is. Then we have my 780 Ti Matrix, which is the only BFR card, 2 gigabit BFR. Yep, pretty good clocks. Sadly, core just under the other card, and even though this one changes voltage, yeah, didn't really do anything, did it? Also, this one I don't run a lot because software side, voltage control on this thing is non-existent to very hard to work with. So I went to use my Elma EVC on it just to find out that. So basically I went to the Elma Discord and asked about this, and basically what I was told is that the 780 Ti Matrix has some IROG chips on the PCB, and these seem to be interfering with the EVC, so you can't really apply voltage to this card. So basically it's always at 1.2 volts and you can't do anything about it. And I could hard mod the card, but yeah, I I don't really want to. So until I figure out a way to overvolt this, it's sadly not gonna be doing me a lot. But the memory on it is pretty good, and I think if the core just gets more voltage, it's also gonna clock pretty well. Then we have my 780 Jetstream. Decent core, memory on it pretty meh, but the core's decent. Like, yeah, I like the card. I enjoyed running it, even though it blew up its fuses twice, and not because of a dead power stage, I think, because it blew up 2 different fuses. Not the same fuse twice, 2 different fuses on completely different power planes, so I think I'm just overdrawing the fuses, because I ran this thing at like 1.45 volts. So yeah. And then the 780 Twin Frozer, better memory and better core, at least for like, well, this is clocking lower, but look at that voltage difference. Like this one, it is a reference card, so if I ever gonna clock this well, I'm probably gonna need an E-power. Also, this was toasted, so it might die again. But basically the plan is to try E-power this someday. Then I have another 780 reference card. This one just literally a reference blower heatsink. This one's trash. This one is literal trash. Like running at more voltage than the last one using the same PCB and doesn't even do 1200, while this one almost does 1300. This is absolute utter garbage. This card will basically only ever be a placeholder and nothing else. Sadly, this one was toasted as well, so it's not like I can just like sell it as a working card. So I guess I'm just gonna use this whenever I need a display out for something and don't really care about which card I'm running. Then we have my good 680 reference. So yeah, reference PCB. MFR memory, pretty meh. Same clock as this AFR, but the difference is MFR doesn't have voltage scaling, AFR does. I was able to clock the memory on this card higher by overvolting it. MFR, no voltage scaling. Also negative code scaling. It likes to be hot just like GDI. At least on AMD cards, but I assume it's the same because it's like literally the same memory chip. But the core on this one is really good. Like, yes, that's 3.5, 1.35, not 1.3, but 1500 megahertz. Like, yeah. Also at 1.28, 1345. Not bad. Like, that's better than this at less voltage. That's not bad. Pretty good card. 680s, well, they GK104s can draw a lot of power, but they are still smaller than GK110s. There's not a big clock speed difference as with 110s and 114s here. So you can compare clock speeds between the two GPUs, but like 104s, they can get pretty power hungry, but they will always be less power hungry than a 110, and therefore more manageable. And then we have the two classifieds. The second one, going to my friend again, the first one I keep, and basically these cards are just completely identical. These have the classified too, so I was able to just get the exact voltage I wanted. Same clocks for stock core, same clocks for memory, same memory chip, and just one clock step difference with overvolted. Actually in favor of the lower AC quality card. So yeah, it's just an indicator, not an absolute thing. Like this is like basically as close to beating every single card you'll find in terms of AC quality as you can get, and it still loses. So yeah. And then lastly we have my 650, which, well, I just kind of ran it because I could. Core's actually surprisingly decent on this one. Like, that's not a lot of voltage and over 1300 megahertz. Sadly, the memory on it is atrocious. Whenever you see LPDA memory, it's just like GDDR5. They have some really decent DDR3, but GDDR5 LPDA down in the trash. Yeah, it basically matches to it basically matches a stock 680 because this actually comes at like 2.5 gigahertz, I think. So yeah. And lastly, the AMD cards, which is basically Kepler just made by AMD, because they, like, in terms of how they overclock, they are very similar. Both of these architectures have a lot of voltage scaling on the core. They also have decent code scaling on the core, however not as severe as Fermi. And yeah, they don't draw that much power, except GK110s do. And I don't have a Hawaii card that would be like the GK110 analog from AMD, but I only have Tahitis, which are basically the GK104 analog. So yeah. And yeah, there is an added thing for AMD cards, which is memory timing modding, because you can actually mod your memory timings on AMD cards you can't do on NVIDIA. And well, it does bring more importance to how good your memory chip is. It doesn't really change the ranking because, well, I don't have a BFR card. And for Kepler, AFR is still always better than MFR, and the same is true here. So AFR is the better memory chip because it runs better timings and also at higher frequency. So yeah. And then there's another LPDA card, which just like, ignore that. That's like literally slower than some of the Fermi cards. Anyway, so yeah, 280X power color, that's the red one. It has a pretty meh core, not that great. Also, I wasn't able to change voltage on this, it was just always locked to this for some reason. But the memory on it, yep, like the best memory strap. Like I did some memory strap testing, and basically this strap was the best performing one, and it does run the strap at the highest frequency out of all these cards. So yeah. Then my 7970 Matrix, which might sound like it's a totally different card, and it kinda is, but mostly I didn't want to do that. Mostly it's the same. The core on it is not that great, but the memory on it is pretty good, even ever so slightly weaker, but like pretty good memory. Then we have a little special, a card that's a little special, which is my 7970 Lightning. This one was dead. I got it for 15 euros, I just heat gunned it and it started working again. However, the previous owner had this in his oven twice, and I think because of that, the capacitors on this card are probably close to dying, if not non-existent at this point. And that reflects in how the card overclocks. Because the core clock on this is pretty low until you reach 1.35 volts. Then it does clock really high for some reason. And I think that's because like if your output filtering is like really bad, which a lot of degraded capacitors, yeah, that's pretty bad. I think this card just has very, very bad transient response. So you just need to go up in voltage until just like even your worst transients don't pull the voltage that low, and then your card can actually clock decent. I think that's my theory. I don't know, like, I don't know enough about transient response to know if that's actually true, but that's my theory. This is MFR. It clocks higher than this card, however, it's at stock timings. No custom timings whatsoever. And you do always lose a bit of frequency from modding your timings, so like even if this was clocking a lot higher than this one, and not just a bit, it would still lose in terms of score. Because especially this custom 1700 strap, like just look up the video I made on it if you want to know more, but like this is a huge performance boost. Like, yeah, modding memory timings isn't necessary to be competitive on these cards. And AFR just does better timings than MFR. Yeah, then we have two more. One's a 7950, the other's a 7970, but they also have MFR. The best strap that MFR runs is 1375. Not a custom one, just the 1375 strap they come with. It just doesn't perform as well. And they also clock lower, especially this one. However, the cores on them are pretty great, so that's like a trend. That's why these are all Tahitis, but slightly different versions. So for 7970s and 280Xs, XT is the oldest version. Then the Gigahertz editions came with the XT2, and then later when the card was rebranded to 280X, they came with XTL cores. And basically the XT cores clock better. And the Tahiti Pro is just the analog to the XT for the 7950, and I think then there was a Pro 2 and a Pro 3, which is then XT2 and XTL respectively. So yeah, these have the old cores and therefore should clock pretty well, like the Lightning because that capacitor thing, but like these have the old cores and they clock pretty well, like 1300 megahertz, 1.3 volts. Pretty good. Yeah, and then, I mean, yeah, that's like a difference between an old core and a new core. And yeah, so lastly I also tested a 7770. This one is really weird, because usually 7770s have 1 gigabyte of memory. And usually they just come with 4 2 gigabit memory chips. This one came with 8 1 gigabit memory chips. I don't know why, but what I can tell you is that it's absolutely torpedoing your performance. Like this thing, oh my god. Like, that memory is just disgusting. Like, that's stock timings, by the way. Yeah, I don't know. Like, even if the core on this was great, which it not really is, like, it's okay, I guess, but, like, that memory clock, no. Like, LPDA already is a red flag, but, like, 7770s, I think, only come with LPDA, so you can't really get around that, but you can get much better LPDA than 1350. So, yeah. Lastly, ASIC quality. On GCN-based cards, pretty much just doesn't matter. Like, I haven't really seen any, like, I've been told it doesn't matter, and I'm not really seeing any trends. Like, yeah, this has the highest ASIC, and yeah, this clocks the best, but, like, 18% 1280, 43% 1245. And yeah, I mean, yeah, this is a newer core, but even among the XTs, like 20 megahertz from like really low to really high, like, well, decent high ASIC quality and pretty low ASIC quality is 20 megahertz difference. I don't think that's any like connection there. So yeah, that's pretty much all the cards. There's some cards I haven't tested yet. Gonna add them eventually and then maybe make another video in like some time. But that should be all the cards now, so we can get to the to a little what's the word? I don't know, just like I put basically some important things down here. So basically here's a memory tier list for each of the generations of what I tested. So best memory for Fermi 2.0, EDI, good voltage scaling, good code scaling, clocks pretty well if you like give it both of that. BFR, I can't say anything about scaling, but it just clocks really high out of the box. Then GDI, clocks pretty high out of the box, but voltage scaling on it is pretty weak, and it also has negative code scaling, so kind of annoying to work with. And then we have the good AFR, because that one at least scales with voltage, and this one is just utter garbage. For Fermi 1.0, well, there's only EDI, so can't really have a tier list with just one thing on it. And then for Kepler, because Kepler has no memory modding on it, we just go by the highest clocking, which is BFR. I can't say anything about cold or voltage scaling on BFR. Then we have DDI. This has cold scaling and also pretty decent voltage scaling. This I haven't really observed to have cold scaling, but it has voltage scaling. This has no voltage scaling and negative code scaling. So that's why the tier list is like that. And then for GCN, yeah, AFR runs better timings and also clocks higher than MFR. So yeah. Then effects of ASIC quality. For both Fermis, if your ASIC quality is higher, you can get better peak clocks out of your core. Yeah, but like you're not gonna be that far from a lower ASIC quality card. But like usually the high ASIC quality cards do a little better. And also, you seem to have less total voltage scaling the higher ASIC quality is. So basically here, this is a really high ASIC quality one, and we have 50 megahertz of scaling between stock and overvolt here. And then we take a lower ASIC quality card and we have 135 megahertz scaling. So that's what I mean. So basically, the higher your ASIC quality is, the better you're gonna clock at low voltage. And therefore, the difference from low voltage to high voltage clock is not gonna be as big as on a low ASIC quality card. Then, yeah, voltage scaling. Medium on Fermi 2.0 and weak on Fermi 1.0, because 1.0 is far more temperature dependent than 2.0. And basically it's also medium because there's still a strong temperature dependency, but voltage has a bigger impact on 2.0 than 1.0. Yeah. Then Kepler is basically the same thing again with ASIC quality. Like, you have good ASIC quality, your card is probably gonna do well, but if you have low ASIC quality, it doesn't mean your card is gonna be bad. It's just usually like good ASIC quality means it's gonna do well, whereas bad ASIC quality can mean either thing. It can do bad, it can do also well. And then also that's the same thing where like, yeah, at low voltage you already clock better if you have high ASIC quality. And then there's just really strong voltage scaling on Kepler because they're not as temperature dependent. So if you yeet the volts, they go really fast. And yeah, so GCN, no effect of ASIC quality, doesn't really seem to care. And also equally as strong voltage scaling because of the same thing. They're not as temperature dependent and they just like to go really fast if you yeet the volts. Then we have a memory chip comparison of all the different memory chips we have here. So these are the chips. Here's the density, which, well, it might be a bit late to explain what density means, but like 1 gigabit means each memory module stores 128 megabytes, and 2 gigabit means each memory module stores 256 megabytes of data. And yeah, here's basically all the things condensed into one table that I said about the memory chips before. So AFR type 1, no voltage scaling, and I think there was some very weak positive temperature scaling, but like basically the card would clock higher at the beginning of the session than when the card is already warm. But that's basically it. I wouldn't really call that good temperature scaling. For clocks, these are all actual clock, so NVIDIA clocks are divided by 2 because MSI Afterburner reports NVIDIA clocks times 2 what they actually are. So there's just like a comparison where you can see what kind of clocks I saw. So this is out of the box, which means no cap mods and stock voltage. And this is like given like all the mods that make sense for the given chip. There's a couple unknowns because I never really tested that chip. And yeah, so AFR type 2, it has like same as type 1, but it has voltage scaling and therefore clocks better. BFR, not really a lot of pretty much unknown. I just know it clocks kinda high out of the box. EDI, strong voltage scaling, strong temperature scaling, clocks kinda low out of the box, but does really well if you just mod it. GDI, pretty weak voltage scaling, but it's still there, and then it has also negative code scaling. Like as I said, like I don't think it was in a video, but I once took a hairdryer to my GTX 580, the second Lightning, the one with the good core and GDI. I took a hairdryer to that and it did actually clock better. Like not just a bit, like over 100 megahertz better when I just took a hairdryer to the memory chips. So yeah. MFR, no voltage scaling. I didn't really see any correlation between voltage. The only thing I saw is when you pump more voltage into it, the chip gets a bit hotter. So it did clock like maybe 10 megahertz better because of that little extra heat. But I wouldn't call it voltage scaling. That's just, yeah, more temperature and like negative temperature scaling. So it does better when it gets hotter. AFR, Has okay voltage scaling, like giving it another 50 millivolts might give you like 100 megahertz. Don't really know anything about temperature scaling. It might just not care, or it might have very weak positive scaling. Didn't really test it enough to know. BFR, well, I just have the 780 Ti matrix and I didn't really run it for anything, so there's a lot of unknowns. Then D-Die has voltage scaling, but it kind of tops out, like it tops out just under 2000. So because of that, like, yes, it has voltage scaling, but you can't really get that far with it because of that wall. So that's why I said medium, not strong. Temperature scaling, I think I've been told it has positive temperature scaling, but I didn't really see any myself, so I put it as unknown. And then the QLP dead chips, which all unknowns, and this is what they clock like. So that's basically what I wanted to go through with this video. I hope, well, entertaining it probably wasn't. Containing useful information, it might for you. I'll see to that there's gonna be a high quality screenshot of this entire thing attached in the description, so you can look through it by yourself and don't like have to pause the video and then like hope that YouTube compression doesn't make it unreadable. So yeah, thank you for watching. Hope you enjoyed, and until next time, goodbye.